Sex couple in South Florida. It has been about a year since the first such appeal on another case to the same court, and the decision on either could be the beginning of the end of Florida's unique 33-year-long ban on gay adoption, or not. The social climate has changed so much over those decades, but the debate remains about human rights, civil rights, family, morality, law, and of course, what is best for the children. And to talk about that this morning, we are joined by State Senator Nan Rich, a South Florida Democrat, Alan Michel, who is an attorney who represents the families in 3 of the 4 successful gay adoptions in South Florida recently, and Paul Carvalho, who is a South Florida pastor representing the Christian Coalition this morning. Thank you all for being here this Sunday morning. Senator Rich, I want to pose the first question to you. 4 recent cases. You have filed in Tallahassee year after year bills to repeal the law that went kind of nowhere. Do you think the legislature now will take notice of what's happening?
Well, I think there's been progress. You wouldn't know it from the fact that the bill is not heard each and every year. But the good news is that more and more of my colleagues sign on as co-sponsors of the bill. When I first started filing the bill, 5 years ago in the Senate, there were very few people who signed on to it. And on both sides now, the House and the Senate, you find more and more legislators supporting the repeal of the ban.
And it's still a very politically charged issue.
It's a politically charged issue, but you know, the truth is that filing the bill, even though I know that it may not be heard, still allows us the opportunity to raise awareness and educate people. And that's as much of a goal as anything else. And then now, as you mentioned, the court there are a number of high-profile cases which will add to the interest in the legislature.
There are 2 cases in front of the DCA currently. Alan Michel is part of one of them.
Yes.
And there are 2 recently cases that have been overturned. The ban has been overturned and the adoption allowed that have not been appealed.
That's right.
What are the differences in the grounds of those 4 cases? Are there differences? Why would 2 be appealed and 2 not be appealed?
Well, of the recent cases, the first one was in August 2008 in Key West, where a former foster parent had become the guardian of his former foster child and he adopted. And the government did not oppose it. And when the Attorney General's office was asked why they didn't, the response was because the child was no longer in state custody and therefore the government really had no role, no standing to get involved in that case. And that was true with the one that was publicized last week in Broward County as well.
If you break a principle, that principle will break you. The principle of law of gravity, for example, if you come against that principle, yes, you can.
And what principle is being broken here?
The principle of morality, the principle of that has been established just as old as the law of gravity. God made them male and female. This is what a child needs in order to grow up right.
You know, I want to go into, for people who don't follow this very closely, I want to go into a little bit of the legislative history. Even this week in the 3rd District Court of Appeals, Judge Rothenberg had asked, what is the legislative history here? This was passed in 1977, and it was a climate of anti-gay fear. What is in the legislative record about this? Do you know? I don't want to put you on the spot.
There are some pretty ugly things that were in, as a matter of fact,
Anita Bryant was part of.
There was some pretty ugly statements by senators. I happened to have just read that opinion last night, and as you said, it was a climate of fear, and I think a lack of education. When you look now, see, to me the principle is what is in the best interest of children.
As it is in all the court cases.
As it is in the court cases.
Yes.
And that's why I have filed this bill year after year after year. Because one of the things that came out in the case that was in Judge Lieberman's court from all the experts was that sexual orientation was not the determinant of whether or not a person is a good parent.
I would call that, for example, sexual disorientation, because what there's a confusion. It's not orientation. we got out of track here. It's a disorientation because when I happen to have this newspaper, this is the bond. I think God gave us a window into time. This 50 years of abuse by priests in that country, well known by all of us. This is yesterday's paper and today's paper. And it's showing 13 people committed suicide as a result of being touched by homosexual priests.
But that's a completely different, Paul, that's a completely different issue than two people giving a loving and caring home to a child. And in fact, since 1977, I've read research, and there's the health and science and pediatric health community is pretty well, there's a consensus that there is no difference in whatever gender parenting is if the home is stable and healthy. Have you seen that?
That's not what I have read. I've read the opposite. There
Well,
is
you can
no.
read.
Can you say, what have you read? What is
I
it?
have read 2 PhD dissertations this past 3 days saying that there is no proof whatsoever. We have not had enough time, like 10, 20. We have not had, like these people, 50 years to test the homosexual situation. There's a priest here, a bishop, that abused his nephew.
Well, I don't want to include priest abuse in this discussion, only because it really
It's
is
homosexuality.
different, but it's a different issue.
You know, you can look at this through different prisms. You can say, well, people didn't understand the minority group. People thought separate but equal was right. People thought Rosa Parks should sit at the back of the bus. Or you can see it as a dislike toward people who are not like us. Galileo was prosecuted by the Inquisition because he challenged the church by saying the sun did not revolve around the earth. There is a role for religion in public discourse, but under our Constitution, we the people have decided not just to have a legislature, but to have a judicial system, which serves as a check. It has to be modest and it has to exhibit humility, but it has to ultimately operate as a check to protect the rights of people who are disfavored by the majority.
You said right, we the people, not I the judge.